Hey everybody, Dan here from Men Need to Be Heard. So this is kind of an impromptu live. I wasn't planning on doing this. Um, for those of you that are watching it later, I'm filming this on the Saturday before Easter. And the reason I'm filming it is I had a couple guys reach out to me this morning because they're struggling dealing with it being Easter weekend. And one in particular kind of hit home with me. He went to pick his kids up last night for the Easter weekend and got denied visitation, as he put it, which, again, I hate the term visitation. We aren't visitors in our children's lives. We're fathers, we're parents. So I kind of, had a little trip down memory lane, if you will. And it's why I wanted to jump on now, because in talking with him and dealing with the whole, you know, scenario of being a divorced dad, being, looking forward to seeing your kids on a holiday and then getting denied the ability to see your children. And it doesn't just affect you, it affects the children dramatically. It also affects other family members. So, for example, again, as I'm kind of going down memory lane a little bit, I, for many years, was denied access to the children on holidays. In fact, it became a very common thing. And I'd be interested to hear, by the way, if any of you have faced this and kind of jump in on it. But it's, I would go to pick them up, and sometimes it was for the weekend. If it was Easter is normally on a Sunday. Well, it always on a Sunday. I shouldn't say normally. So, if it was my weekend, I should have had them. Or if it was my holiday, I should have had them. And I would go to pick them up and not be able to get them because I'd be denied them. She would do that knowing full well nothing was going to happen from it, right? If it's Friday night, you can't go file for an emergency court order. It's not going to happen. Courts are closed. And by the time, the following week ran around, the holiday's done, I could go file for a motion. And I often did, by the way. All right. In fact, if you are denied access to the children, you should file a motion. All right. Because if you do it enough, which is what I did, eventually, if she keeps repeating the pattern and basically telling the judge, screw you, you could very well end up with custody. And I did. But, again, I was talking with someone and having faced the situation, I kind of figured I would jump on and talk about it. And really kind of help people to understand that, what we go through as dads. And by the way, I'm also a child of divorce. My parents split when I was about 6 months old, 7 months old. I have some suspicions on why that happened. I'm not going to go into them here because it's irrelevant, but there were times my mother denied me being able to go see my father and the family. Because as I said earlier, it doesn't just affect you. It doesn't just affect the children but it also affects the family, the extended family. The children lose access to the extended family. Let's face it, many times families only get together on holidays. So in my particular case, I don't really have strong connections with my father's side of the family, not from, lack of attempts to. It was just simply because I never got to spend time with them because they would get together on holidays. That side of my family is primarily Italian. If you're Italian, especially old school Italian. My grandfather was from Italy. It's very family oriented. So I never got to spend that time with them because my mother would deny me being able to go. And then I faced it again as a father with my children. My children, honestly, as despite my best efforts, really didn't get to know my side of the family and still don't. Um, because of that, because you don't see them, right? So cousins, aunts, uncles, all of that going back way back. It's what it is. When you get denied the ability to see the children, it affects the children especially on holidays. Anytime it does, but especially on holidays because again, you lose that contact with the extended family. And so again, I was talking with that gentleman this morning. I'm not going to give names or anything. I did invite him to jump on this and share his story if he wishes to. He knows I was going live. Again, I just kind of impromptu threw this up. And I'd like to have you guys comment if you're going through this. And, if you're a mother seeing this, mother who's got divorced children, maybe it'll give you some understanding of the effect it's having. Often these situations are used as a weapon to get back at the father for whatever perceived injustice he's done. And really, the ones who end up getting hurt are the children. Plain and simple. And as I said, there's not much recourse that a father would have in that situation. So as I was talking with the gentleman this morning, he's like, well, can I call the police? Yeah, you can call them. They will respond. And for the most part, there are some agencies that might not, but for the most part, the police will respond. They'll treat it as a domestic, as they'll call it. They're not going to do anything. Even if you go with a court order, you could literally have your court order, show it to the police officer. They're not going to get involved. It's a civil matter. It is not a criminal matter. And that I've had conversations with several police officers, divorce attorneys, and so on. It's a civil matter. So they're not going to get in the middle of it, so to speak. What they'll do, and short and sweet terms, is they'll tell you to go file for a violation in family court. And yes, you should do that. But again, it doesn't get the holiday back, right? Kind of talk about that a little bit. As I said earlier, every single time it happened, I filed. And I hated having to do it, to be honest with you. I got better things to do with my time, really, than spend it half a day in court, right? And sometimes you got to get an attorney. I, more often than not, handled these pro se because I studied the law, got to know it well, and educated myself. So I really learned how to handle it. But many of you may not feel comfortable doing that, or maybe don't have the time to get educated. And I understand and respect that. Get an attorney to handle for it. Of course, that's going to cost money. But anyway, I would file the paperwork, and we talked about on the podcast, about a month ago now, I had David, who's a divorce attorney, on. One of the biggest mistakes you can make is not filing the paperwork correctly. So again, if you know how to do it, great. If you don't, hire a lawyer. But I did, and I would file, and then, so let's use it hypothetically. It happened this weekend. I would file the motion, the violation, in the next few days. Let's say early next week. I might get in court, depending on how backed up they are, and they are backed up often, usually 4 to 6 weeks out. So, Easter's now. This would be dealt with. We'll get into that in a second. Mid-May, right? So obviously the holidays passed, and getting in the courtroom, and presenting your case. Again, you have to go in there, and we've talked about this on the podcast as well. You can't be angry. You can't be emotional, right? You have to present facts. The courts deal with facts. And a lot of times these are slam dunks because, The court order is the court order. It's a violation of a court order. It's a violation of a custody agreement or a visitation agreement, however you want to phrase it. And unless she's got a damn good reason and can prove it, doesn't stand a chance, right? So more often than not, well, in my case, it was 100% of the time I quotes won. There's no winning, by the way. But more often than not, having seen other guys go in and do it, you're going to win. Again, I put win in quotes because no one's winning this. And the ones that are losing are the children. What are you going to win? Not a damn thing. She's not going to jail. She's not going to get fined. None of that stuff's going to happen. And I hate to tell you this, but the mistake I see, and I'm not speaking as an attorney. I am not an attorney, okay? I taught myself the law. I have no, quotes, legal training whatsoever. So I am not advising you as in legal terms. I'm just sharing my story. But the mistake I see guys do is they go in thinking they're going to get her put in jail and they'll push the court for it. The court's never going to do it, okay? There was one time I did ask for it. And mind you, this was after we've been going to court 8, 9 years and multiple times her being found in violation. What the judge normally did and what I've seen in other cases is he'll wag his little finger or her little finger pretty much. Sometimes literally, right? One time he's like, don't do that again. That's all they're going to do. Now they'll try and give you makeup time. The classic one that I talk about is there was one time she did not let me see the kids at Christmas. Think about that for a second. So the kids are all excited. In her particular case, she was to have them Christmas Eve, and I was going to get them at 8 a.m. Christmas morning. I showed up 8 a.m. Christmas morning. She didn't let the kids come out, claimed they were still asleep, which I knew wasn't true, and subsequently found out later they had already opened all their presents at her house. But I didn't get to see the kids that Christmas. I did ultimately get them a day or two later, which in retrospect ended up somewhat biting me in the butt. We ended up going to court right before the Super Bowl. Right, this is when the Super Bowl was in late January. Now it's in February. So we go to court. It was, I remember, it was the Thursday before the Super Bowl was going to be played. And it was not my weekend to have the kids. It was hers. So I said, what can we do? I've lost that time at Christmas. And the judge was like, well, you saw him a couple days later. And I'm like, I understand that, but they missed time with my family and all that. Long story short, he gave me Super Bowl weekend as a makeup. Now, again, I got a couple days more than I would have, right? Because it was her weekend, but trying to compare a Super Bowl weekend with Christmas Day, nowhere near the same. And again, none of my family was going to be there. So the kids were not able to see the family at that point. So it kind of speaks to how they approach it, right? He made up the time, the judge did. And I appreciated it. I did. And I think the kids did too, but it's not the same, right? They missed out on seeing parts of my family that had gotten together. You get the idea, right? So that's kind of how they'll handle it, though. And I've seen that with other cases. Karaji, glad they gave you extra time at least. Yes, it was something. And again, I actually got on a first name basis with this judge later on. I would run into him around town occasionally, and it would be hilarious because, I was on a first name basis with him. He knew who I was. I knew who he was. We'd seen each other many times. But anyway, I did appreciate that he tried that at least. But long story short, I kept filing on these, and this is the thing I would encourage you to. Again, knowing she's never going to go to jail. It's not going to happen, ever. I don't know of a single case in the state of New York where a mother went to jail for it. I lived in New York at the time. I no longer live there. I am aware of one case nationwide. There's, I'm sure, others, but I know of one where the mother got a weekend in jail after literally years of violations. In my case, like I said, after 8-9 years, I asked for that. I said to the court, look, we're in here 3-4 times a year, and we were actually in court often. It was a nightmare. She loved to go to court, and her attorney loved making money, so he would get her to file motions. But anyway, not the topic for now. But I would file when she violated, and eventually the judge started getting ticked. So one day, her Drive HMD 27, her family is always infinitely more important to her. Yes, that's exactly how my ex felt, and many exes feel. And you're right, the kids absolutely not only deserve but need to see both families. It's to their benefit. You know, they always talk about best interest of the children. There's a classic example. Getting back to my story. So he found her in contempt of his order, and he was ticked, and I knew it, right? Even her attorney knew it, right? And she would get very combative with the judge sometimes. Whereas I was a robot in the courtroom. I've talked about it before on the podcast and on some of the other lives I did. I showed no emotion. My attorney that I would come in with me occasionally used to laugh at me. She's like, nothing phases you. Because I would be pissed beyond belief sometimes, but I wouldn't show it. But anyway, so the judge is ticked, and I knew it. He knew it. We all did. The entire courtroom knew it, right? So he said words to the effect of, what are we going to do here? It is hard to do, Karachi. Yes, it is. But for whatever reason, I'm really good at it. I can separate the emotion. I don't know why. My attorney used to tell me you're the only one I've ever seen that could ever do it to the level you do. But anyway, so the judge goes, well, what are we going to do here? So I raise my hand very politely and say, Your Honor, can I make a suggestion? Now, mind you, he's pissed, all right? We all knew it. He goes, what? And I said, how about she spend one weekend in jail? I didn't ask for anything more than that. I said, the next time I have the kids, I'll pick them up. Why don't you have her spend that weekend in jail? And I'm paraphrasing what I said. I actually have somewhere in this house the transcripts. Because by the way, recommendation, guys, always, always, always get the transcripts from any court appearance you make. Just get them. Because if you ever need to go back to court, having them is valuable. John, how much did your divorce cost you? I will tell you right now, I spent over 6 figures on my end. Last I knew, she was over $300,000. Mine, Karaji, was for contempt in this particular case. We'll get to alienation in a minute. Because that's actually how I ended up with custody. So anyway, I asked the judge in this one instance for that. He's pissed. He's found her in contempt already. Wouldn't do it even then. So that kind of gives you perspective. I can't do that. Legally, he can. He couldn't make that leap to do it. Had he done it, I think it would have stopped things then and there from happening again. Now, mind you, I would sit in that courtroom. Hey, Jesse, nice to see you're on. Yes, get those transcripts. To show someone you tried, that's a beautiful one. But also, if you ever need to go into a law office or change lawyers, having those transcripts are invaluable, and then they don't have to order them. Karaji, no, he did not say why he refused. He basically said, no, I can't do that. And again, gave me extra time down the road. doing the old finger wag, as I used to say. So again, I tried in that one instance. Normally, I wouldn't have even recommended doing that, but the circumstances kind of led me to do it. So anyway, continuing on with that. Again, I stuck to my guns. I kept filing. Eventually, it did come across as alienation, right? And ultimately, I ended up with custody because of it, right? It wasn't one instance, and this is a key point that I want to make here. Something that I think a lot of guys don't understand, and girls, right? Men, women, whatever, is that, and divorce attorneys will tell you. I had David on about a month ago on my podcast. By the way, the podcast tomorrow, real quick side note, I have Matt, a.k.a. Matchuli from TikTok, coming on. It'll post on YouTube at 11 a.m. tomorrow, Eastern time. Eastern U.S., I guess I should say, because this goes worldwide sometimes. But anyway, on the podcast, David and I had talked about the bias in the courts. And I've talked with many divorce attorneys. They all recognize it. They know it. They play it, right? They love it, because who makes out when there's a lot of animosity and there's bias? Any guesses? It isn't the parents. It isn't mom or dad, and it isn't the children. It's the attorneys, right? As I said a little while ago, I spent over 6 figures on mine. Between the two of us, it probably was over $400,000. Again, I heard the number 300,000 from someone that had spoken to my ex. I don't know if that's true or not, but doing the math, it probably was. Think about, now that I'm almost 60, if I'd have had that 100,000 sitting in the bank, right? But it kind of gives you perspective on what will happen with these. So to kind of really get into what I wanted to talk about today, because I just sidetracked completely, is dealing with missing that time at holidays, because we just spoke about the legalities. Let's set that aside. Let's talk about the effect it has mentally, emotionally, physically. It's tough. And guys, I get it, right? I've been through it many, many, many times. I despise the holidays now. Despise them. I subsequently moved from New York. I live in North Carolina now. So to be fair, I'm 700 plus miles from my kids at this point, because all my kids are still in New York. Various parts of New York, but they're in New York. So I don't see them now. And I guess I have to take responsibility because I'm not close. But even that set aside, my kids range in age from 36. One just had a birthday. 36 to 26. So they're 10 years apart. All right. My youngest is 26. I have not had a holiday with all of my children together since 2008. It's 2023. It's 15 years. Captain Spaulding, you in NC also? Love NC. Love it, love it, love it. So again, I have not had a holiday with all of my children since 2008. Am I against legalizing brothels? Good question. I really haven't thought about it. It's not something I would do. Just off the cuff, I'm going to say, I guess. What part of Jersey, Captain Spaulding? Just curious. Brothels. Geez, I've never really thought about it. I'm going to be honest with you. It's not, again, I would never do it. I've been to Vegas. I've walked down the strip, and anybody who's been to Vegas and walked down the strip knows they're all over the place, and they hand you flyers like crazy. Boy, do they kill trees. Well, last time I was in Vegas was in the late 80s. I'd probably never go back because it's not my thing. I don't gamble or any of that. Now we're all going to think about it. You're right. It's like, John, to answer your question, I have absolutely no contact with her whatsoever. The last time I saw my ex would have been somewhere around 2017, 18, somewhere in there. She was at my daughter's at the same time I was, and even though it was probably 90 degrees out, you could have froze the pool that we're sitting by with the with the stares I was getting from her. Um, but anyway, kind of talking about it. The reason I hate the holidays now is I don't have contact with my kids, because even though my kids got older, and I've had this conversation with, for example, my oldest daughter. My oldest daughter does everything she can to keep me involved as much as she possibly can. She did it when I lived in New York, and I actually lived about 3 miles from her. And even now, right? We do we usually use Facebook chat type thing because that's what she likes. But I get to see her, I get to see my granddaughters that way, right? But when I lived, and again, I was only 3 miles from her, I still didn't get to see the kids on Christmas. It had to be Christmas morning sometimes, like she would have me come over for breakfast. But I had to be cleared out because the ex came for dinner, or she had to go to the ex's for dinner, and God forbid. My ex, mind you, we split in 1995. She is still living that divorce to this day. I've long let it go, right? But it's just amazing. I'm still looking at some of the notes. I love that you guys are chatting, by the way. Prop thugs. I hear you. I hear you. But again, I don't like the holidays. It's very difficult on me mentally to deal with them. Tomorrow's Easter. I could care less. It's another day to me. Christmas, I actually hate Christmas now because it's such a negative connotation. Now, mind you, when the kids were younger, I loved Christmas. I was the house, my second wife and we were the house that, was the neighborhood house as far as the decorations. God, I had a friendly rivalry with my neighbor across the street. He'd add a string of lights, I'd add two, he'd add three. I mean, this went on for years. And it's just, we were that house. I loved Christmas. Halloween was my second one, and it was 1 and 1A. And I hate the holidays because my parents used to force me to participate, but they were never my thing. Interesting. Are you talking about like in a divorce situation or just in general? I'm curious. Just kind of looking through some of the comments while I'm talking here. Wolf Pup Poet, abandoned on Christmas Eve. I feel, yeah, it's tough. Griswolds, yes, Captain Spaulding. I made the Griswold. What's his name? What's his first name? Clark. I made him look like a rank amateur. And my neighbor across the street, Declan was his name. He was from Ireland, of all places. What a great guy he was. Oh, you were abandoned by your mother. I'm sorry to hear that, but I can relate a little bit to that. But yeah, we would full out decorate. Same at Halloween, by the way, right? So I loved Halloween also. Very rarely got to see my kids on Halloween. If it wasn't my weekend, I wouldn't see them, right? But again, I hate Halloween now, despise it. Because even though it's a, quotes, lesser holiday, I still have that negative connotation about all holidays. People ask me now what's my favorite holiday. I don't have one in particular. If you held I can't say that on here. If you held a pew pew to my head, I would say probably Thanksgiving, mostly because it's eating and football for me, right? Halloween was my favorite holiday with my kids, Prop Thugs. I always carried a pillowcase for their candy. Funny story. My one son, who, once I got custody, he was 14, 15. He went out. My neighborhood was the neighborhood, right? I know he got at least 4 pillowcases full. Genius. He actually had multiple costumes he went around with. I mean, I probably shouldn't have let him do it, but Payday. Captain Spaulding, are you talking about your favorite candy, or did I miss something? Because I'm kind of talking and scrambling at the same time here. By the way, my favorite candy, this was the deal I had with my kids, is, and I had this with my son when he got his 4 pillowcases and 4 different costumes, I think it was. I got all the Snickers bars. That was my deal with them. Payday was your favorite holiday? That's a good one. Except half your paycheck went to her, right? That's a good one. I like that one. But it's tough even now. So as I said, my kids are all grown. My oldest is 36. My youngest is 26. She'll be 27 in November. And as I said, my oldest daughter, who's 33, going to be 34 this year, or no, she's 34, going to be 35. Wow, I cannot do math today. Does her best, but even still, because my ex is still dwelling on that holiday fight, does everything she can. Now, I would have, like, if my daughter said, hey, you're both going to be here, I'd be like, okay, cool. I got no problem with it. I would have no issue whatsoever. None. I'd be cordial because I've let that all go. My kids' annual rent was 50% of their chocolate. I like that one. Oh, they were allergic to it. Okay. Yeah, like I said, I just got the Snickers. But, going back to what I was talking about, even though I could be cordial, she can't. And my daughter and I have had in-depth conversations about this. And she's like, Dad, look, I get it. And she says, I wish it could be otherwise. But Mom, because it's her mom, will not allow it. She will make my life hell. I'm paraphrasing, but that's what it is, right? And to be honest, we kind of were touching on alienation earlier. My kids went through it, all right? So they still have their quote-unquote scars from it. And so she can't pull the trigger and tell her mother, well, then you can't come. She just can't do it. And I get it. Not happy about it. But again, it's tough on me mentally. And again, my daughter does what she can. And at least I know that, right? My younger son is very silent on it because he lives alone. He's not into dating or marriage. He's one of those ones that he's never going to get married because he saw, right? But he at least makes an effort, right? He'll send me a text. His thing is to send me a text with pictures of his dog. That's his way of doing it, right? And that's fine. That's great, right? And I send him pictures of my dog. My dog's sitting under my feet right now, Molly. But emotionally and mentally, even though that's all really behind us, it's still draining to me. So, hearing from the guy this morning who's suffering, I feel for him. I genuinely feel for him. And again, I invited him to come on here and talk because he is on TikTok. He reached through DMs to me, reached out to me. And, we had a conversation off and on for about an hour and a half this morning. Me trying to help him in, as in the only ways I can, which is basically to listen and kind of say, hey, I feel you, and this is my story also. But it's sad because, as he said to me, he's got nowhere else to go either, right? His family doesn't live nearby. I guess, I hate to say everything, but I'm just going to say basically he moved across the country away from his family when he got married. Adizim, you're welcome. Thank you for listening to my ranting. But anyway, so he's got no one close by. He says, I don't have a lot of friends, and the ones I have, they're not going to invite me over. So he's going to be spending tomorrow alone. If he were nearby to me, I would invite him over sit and watch the Masters. I love the Masters, by the way. If you're any golfers on here, I will be spending hours watching the Masters today and tomorrow. But I feel for him, and he's going to be sitting alone. That can be very dangerous. And I'm not worried about him, by the way. I'm not. But the other thing that happens often around the holidays, excuse me, I got to take a quick drink. The unaliving statistics for men skyrocket. And I've tried to, get data on this. So one of the things that I've recently was trying to do is get like specific current data on fathers being denied access to the children on the holidays. There is none. It's never really been studied. Think about that for a second. Let that sink in. Why wouldn't they be studying that? They study everything else. They're not going to study that. But I am aware of a study that was done 22, 3, 4 years ago where there was a study done and they asked mothers. There was two things they were asking. The study was more about did fathers pay child support. They asked only mothers and got some number and tried to publish it. It got poo-pooed real fast because the data was invalid because they never asked fathers. But a follow-up was done. They're not going to study issues that could help them lose money. You're absolutely right. They can't have the truth get out. Captain Spaulding, thanks for listening. You have a great day. Have a great holiday. Be safe yourself. But anyway, the counter study, if you will, to that was done found that when you ask the fathers about child support, by the way, the state's data is public. You can go find it. So they were finding out that what the father said pretty much mirrored what the state data showed, but the mothers were. Have you seen this ridiculous video going viral about women being courageous leaving good marriages? I don't believe I have, Racket Man. One stand-up guy, personally had nothing but issues on holidays, even my own scheduled time being blocked. Yep. But anyway, on this study, this counter study, which again never got published, but although I think, I'll have to reach out to him. I haven't talked to him in a while. Warren Farrell, I think, did an article on this way back when. But anyway, the study found that what the men said as far as paying child support mirrored the state data, whereas the women's claims were poo-pooed. But it also asked about how often, and again, they asked mothers and fathers, how often fathers did not get to see their children. I forget how they phrased it. It wasn't denied visitation. It was something similar to that. The male response was somewhere on the order of 100%. Have you ever been denied access to your children? I'm paraphrasing again. It was damn near 100%. And I will tell you in my own, unscientific anecdotal evidence is I find that number's pretty damn close too. I wouldn't put it at 100, but probably high 90s. Whereas the women said they'd never done it, or it was very low number. Which is why when, you see online women posting, my ex wants nothing to do with the kids. I always look at that with a jaundiced eye. Because one, no real father would ever not want to see his kids. And if it's gotten to that point, there's a reason. Usually parental alienation's involved of some sort, or he's been denied access, or he's been beaten down so bad he just can't get up. And it happens. But anyway, that study showed that being denied access to the children, and the children, more importantly, the children are being denied access to their father and his family. That's why when they say, oh, it's always about the best interest of the children, what a load of crap that is. I'm just looking at some of the comments real quick while I'm talking out loud here. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Em. I must have missed something. My apologies. But that's why I have a jaundiced eye when you see all the time. You see like say on TikTok, but you see it on all the social medias. A mother will post up, "Oh, my ex is a deadbeat. He never wants to see his children." Blah blah blah, and you'll see them come out of the woodwork to support her. She's planning to play the victim role when in reality, many many times, not always, okay, it's actually she denied it, and my ex denied she ever did it. We kind of talked about transcripts earlier. I know Jesse mentioned it to show it to other people. I had a couple people who were like, "I cannot believe you never want to see your children. You never show up. You don't pay your support." I said, "Come here." Pulled the transcripts out and showed them. Opened their eyes up real fast. Yeah, I do the same thing, Em. I have, in fact, I've posted it on a couple times. The ones that were really voracious, I would say, "Hey, do me a favor. I'm doing some research. Can you give me your ex's contact information? And I will reach out to them to find out, for my research, and I am researching it, why they're not seeing their kids." And trying to figure out what that ding dong was on my phone. I have yet to be given the information, which kind of tells you right then and there what's going on. But again, I want to kind of get back to the emotional side of it. So I've also been a child in that situation. All right. 50 years ago, still affects me. Still affects me. My mother, and I've talked about it before, was Satan. All right. She was an evil, evil woman. And she, not always, she wasn't quite as bad as some, but there were those times where she would play the game. And not let me see my father and that side of the family on a holiday. And, I remember sitting there one time. So it was a Christmas morning. I'm trying to think of how old I was. Probably 8, 9. And, Christmas morning, opening the presents. I remember I got G.I. Joe that year. For whatever reason, it was the Dune Buggy. Those of you old enough to remember, that's when G.I. Joes were a foot tall, not the little dinky ones they are now. I wish I still had them, by the way, because they'd be worth a lot of money. But I got the little Dune Buggy and the G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip. Anybody remember those? Am I a child divorce? Yeah, I'm talking about it now, Karaji. So, I remember opening my presents that morning, and the arrangement was, in my particular case, as a child, I was supposed to go to my father's in the afternoons, so roughly lunchtime, noon. All right, and my mother said, "Your father's not coming," and I'm like, "What? And what was interesting is that I came to find out later. And my father, by the way, did everything he could not to make sure I didn't know what was going on behind the scenes, to his credit. He did actually show up, but I didn't know it, right? So my bedroom was in the back of the house. My mother kind of shooed me to my bedroom to play with my new toys, my G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip and that kind of stuff. And basically told him, I found out later, much later, years later, that she wasn't going to let me go, right? So, but as a child, I had no idea. Now think about that for a second. Here I am, 8, 9 years old, whatever it was, wondering, why doesn't my father want to see me on Christmas Day? And I didn't actually see him until Christmas that year was like on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, somewhere in there. I don't remember exactly. I didn't see him for the 2 weeks prior, 2 weeks after, sorry, because the following week when I was supposed to be at my mother's and the weekend after that was the final time I actually got to open my Christmas presents, 2 weeks after Christmas. We were already back in school at that point. So it was probably, I don't know, January 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, somewhere in there. So, you think about that as a child. spending that time wondering, wait a minute, I still believed in Santa at that point. That's how young I was. Um, Not knowing and feeling rejected, and even though I've dealt with it and I understand what happened now, even as I'm talking about it, it still affects me, right? At almost 60 years old. And having been through it with my kids also, I knew what they were feeling and going through. My stepkids haven't seen their dad in July, will be 3 years because of false allegations. I am so sorry to hear that. It's a tough, tough, tough situation. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm relating to is how they feel. It's going to affect them the rest of their life. If I'm being honest, it affected me in my marriages. It affected me in every relationship I had. To be blunt, most of my friends, my best friend happens to be female. Most of my friends have always been female because, having talked with a shrink about it, I have this negative association that men are going to abandon me from incidents like that. Even though my father was not refusing to see me, even though I was told he was, but I was told he was. That's what I mean to say. Yeah, their mother doesn't give a shit. I like the way you put that to cover yourself, because it's about her, not the kids, right? And that's ultimately what it is. So, going through therapy, it took me a while. It wasn't until I was about 40 that I really realized what was going on, and was able to address it. You never get rid of the feelings. I still have them even now. Like I said, it was 20 years ago I addressed it, but they're still there, right? It's it's really ingrained as part of my soul is the way I would put it. It's deep in me. And so when you have a time like now, it's Easter. If your kids are young, you may have it as a religious holiday. You may have it as just do the Easter bunny. Whatever, right? That's unique to you and your family and your situation. I'm not a religious person. The religious side of it is nothing that's ever been entered in mine. But it's tough. One of the fondest memories I have was of Easter morning with my kids so my youngest would have been at the time 7, and my twins would have been 5, and then my younger daughter with my first wife would have been 3. 2, yeah, 3. That Easter morning, what my ex had done or overnight you have to hide the baskets, right? But she had taken, I believe it was baking soda, and made bunny prints all through the house, right? Really smart on her part, by the way. And I remember the kids waking up and finding the bunny prints and following them through the house, and finding their baskets, all that stuff. If you're a parent, you know what I'm talking about. And that was actually the last Easter we had, because a few weeks later she moved out, took the kids, took everything. I literally, and I've talked about this before, I literally came home to an empty house. The only thing that was left was a mattress and my clothes. I'm not kidding. She cleaned it out. I went for work on a Friday morning. She said she was sick. Was going to stay home that day. Had a bunch of people just clean the house out. But anyway, that's the last family memory I have of that family unit. Well, it's a good one, right? Having talked with the kids about it, they remember it. My youngest doesn't. She was only about 3, but the 3 older ones remember it. And, they lost out on all of that afterward, for various reasons. It's things like that. The reason I bring that all up, yeah, Gogli, I feel you, brother. It is anybody that's dealt with that. You have no idea what pain is to come home to an empty house, like emptied out. Um, I remember it was a Friday, and I came home. I got home from work 6:30 ish most days, and there was like the lights were out. She took the lamps. She took the bulbs out of the ceiling lights. Okay, all right. That's how bad it was. And just laying there, going what? Laying on the mattress because it's all there was, and just devastated. Um, but anyway, I don't want to get into that too much now because I'm going to talk about the holidays. So where I want to go with this, because I've been babbling for a while, and I truly appreciate everyone's comments. Karaji, hang in there, everybody. Amen, brother. Amen. Um, Here's what I want to say to people, and this goes out to dads, moms, anyone. One, if you are in this situation, if you are a divorced parent, mother or father, do not put the kids in the middle. Don't do it. I don't care how much you hate your ex. Don't do it. Because, as I said, 60 years later, it's still affecting me, 50 years later. All right? And I handle it better than most people. And I've been told that by some people. If you want to hurt your kids, there's nothing you can do more than deny them access to the other parent. Because you will hurt your kids. You'll hurt your ex. Absolutely you will. But you will devastate your children. Because that's their father or their mother. If you're a dad and you do the opposite, not let your ex, their mother, have access to the children, you're just as bad. And I've had guys try and justify it to me that have had custody. And let me tell you, I ripped them, tore them a new one more than once. Excuse me. It's a vile, vicious thing to do. So one, don't do it. Two, if you find yourself as the non-custodial parent, to use the legal term, and are denied access, number one piece of advice I would give you is document the hell out of it. All right. Show up, first of all. So big mistake you can make. And my ex tried this is, the kids are sick. Don't come get them. Well, I would still go. And I would make sure I had someone with me that could then testify that I was there. Right? Because it matters later when you go to court. All right? Because they'll claim you didn't show up, so therefore you didn't want to see them. All right? Go. Bring a witness with you. Don't rely on video, because unless you do it right, video may not be able to be entered into court. Right? There could be state laws. There could be legal things. You've got to document this. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not a lawyer to begin with. Take a witness with you, which I did. That can then later go, yeah, he was there. That's really all they have to say, right? He did try and get the kids. Document everything. Write it down. So you go, you get denied, you come home. I know you're devastated. I know you're emotionally just destroyed. You want to see your kids. It's heartbreaking. Take a few minutes and write down what happened, because you're emotional. You're not going to remember everything exactly. I used to keep a notebook. I still have them. In fact, some of them are in the closet right behind me that you can't quite see. That door, right there, that door over there is the closet. I have some of my notebooks. I used to keep a notebook in the car. So when something happened, I would jot notes down, right? This was, my stuff was going on before, the internet was a thing, but it was before phones had cameras. My God, I had a cell phone, the brick ones. But document it, because that's valuable information for later. And then absolutely 100% file a motion in the court. File for a violation. All right. As I said at the beginning, you're not going to get her in jail. You're not going to get her fined. You're not going to get custody the first time it happens, but document, file, and in the long run, you're establishing a pattern, right? And that's what can ultimately resolve things. Preston Nelson, documents, time, dates, yes, absolutely, as well as kept all document notes. Keep it all. There's a lot of reasons to do it. I'm focusing on the legal side, right? And in fact, I told the story with David when he was on the podcast with me. By the way, podcast, check it out, guys, right? It's on YouTube, not here. Men Need to Be Heard. I had David Peraro, who's a divorce attorney, on about a month ago, and we talked about these situations. And I shared the story how I had these notebooks, and one time I had to go up on the stand, and I asked to have my notebook with me. And her attorney did not want me to have it, and the judge said, no, you can have it. And boy, did he get his eyes open, because he knew then I wasn't lying, because it was all documented, right? I had dates, times, everything. Yeah, could someone fudge that? Yeah, but it kind of showed that my credibility was much better than hers. Let's just leave it at that. So document. And oh, by the way, later on down the road, if you have to show it to another attorney or, I would not do this, but if my kids were to say to me, can you, all the stuff that happened, can you prove it? I could show them. I would never do it, but I could, right? Because I still have all that stuff, as well as the transcripts. No good would come of it, so I'm not going to do that. But I could understand a situation where it might. Yes, helped your coworker during a custody battle with the ex. Yep, it does matter, having that documentation. But file, all right, guys and girls. They're non-custodial mothers exist. And be willing to fight. Again, you're fighting for your children. You're fighting to, stay active in their lives as best you can. You shouldn't have to fight. Any mother that says, well, the thing that sets me off more than another is he should fight for his children. No, he shouldn't have to fight. Any mother that makes that comment, and by the way, if a father made it, I'd say the same thing. That is an unfit parent. No one should have to fight to see their children. That's all I'm going to say on that. Trips banned. If men want to change the situation, we need to vote. Yes and no. I agree with you. I get what you're saying, but I will tell you right now, both parties hate men. I have seen people argue this party's better than that one. Both sides. I will tell you right now, I have lobbied. I lobbied for years the New York State Legislature. It is equal. It is equal in support of men, which is not as many. It is equally as equal in against men. Third party, fair point. I can't disagree with you on that trips ban, but will tell you most third parties, it's not an issue to them. Again, I've talked with the Green Party. I'm trying to remember of all. The Libertarian Party. Libertarian Party's attitude, I'm mostly Libertarian, by the way, is that, they don't want the government involved. I agree with that, by the way. That's kind of my viewpoint. But agreed, we need to vote. We need to find politicians that support equality, true equality, and that view men as not just wallets, but active parents. That's who you need to support. I don't care what party they are. They could be from, I better be careful how I say that, the worst party possible, and I would vote for them over someone else if they supported fathers, and more importantly, supported kids, because when you're supporting fathers, you're supporting kids. But get out, take action, right? File those motions. I am living proof that if you do it enough, you can ultimately, and there's no winners here, but I'm going to use the term, you can ultimately win custody. I am proof of that. A lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of years, a lot of anguish, a lot of emotion. It is not easy. It is, I don't know of anything harder in my life, and I've been through some horrible things, all right? The hardest thing I did was having to keep fighting. And again, I say you should never have to fight, but keep fighting. And it's both the hardest thing, but also the thing I'm most proud of in my life. All right. So, Preston, just a note for you on the only two battered men's homes in the USA. Next week, so tomorrow I have Maddie, aka Machowley, on the podcast. That'll go up at 11 Eastern tomorrow. The following Sunday, I am having an executive from one of the only two male shelters in the U.S., the one in Arkansas. I'm having an executive from there come on the podcast, and we are going to talk about that whole situation. Why there's only two shelters for men. And I tried to open one in upstate New York about 20 years ago and got nowhere with it. So you might be interested in that. So if you're not following me on YouTube, head on over to YouTube. Blatant plug here. I freely admit it. Men Need to Be Heard on YouTube. I'm also on Instagram. Follow me on YouTube, because the other side of it, guys, is I've already been banned on TikTok, three other prior accounts. That's why I'm on Men Need to Be Heard 3. All right. This one, who knows? Lately, it's been okay, but it's just a matter of time before they do a mass reporting and try and get me banned again. I know it's coming. You know it's coming. YouTube and Instagram have been great. I've never had an issue with either one of them. But follow me over on YouTube. I do put separate content over there that I don't on TikTok and Instagram, obviously, because it's longer content. But yeah, to speak to the podcast briefly, if I may promote it, I am having one of the executives from the shelter come on. We're going to be talking about domestic violence against men, how it's not being addressed properly, why there's only two shelters in detail. We'll get into that. In fact, we're doing the interview Monday, because what I do is I pre-record the interviews, just because Sunday mornings are tough to get people on. But I am super excited about this. We've already had some pre-conversations. But again, just to kind of talk about the podcast real briefly, if there are topics you want me to cover on the podcast, I can get experts to come in. Like I said, I've got someone coming from the shelter on. I had David on, who's a divorce attorney. I've got another one lined up to come on in the future. Not exactly sure when that'll be. I have reached out to a couple politicians to talk about things. I had Jesse Sakavich from Iowa Fathers in to talk about, shared parenting. I've talked about mental illness, all this stuff. The podcast is for you guys. It's to help men. And by the way, it's not about bashing women. That podcast is not about bashing women. I have no issue with women, contrary to what my detractors like to say. What I do have an issue with, and what I point out, is that there's a lot of hypocrisy and double standards towards men, and that's what I address. Unfortunately, sometimes that involves having to point out things sometimes women say. Again, I don't hate women. I have no ill will towards women, but that's the reality. Anyway. And I mean, guys, I'm looking at the chat. If you got something you want to say or want me to answer, if there's something you want me to talk about on the podcast, let me know. You can also email me, menneedtobeheard@gmail.com. You can DM me on TikTok. That said, guys, if you DM me, understand I get hundreds of them a day. Literally hundreds. I do my best, and I'll be honest with you, sometimes I miss them, okay? And, comments, there's thousands of comments made a day. I miss a lot, and I apologize for that, but I'm a human being. I can only do so much. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up pretty quick here. Anybody have any final comments, feel free to chime in. The one final thing, where I was going when I got sidetracked. As you can tell, that's why I record the podcast, because I jump around a little bit. One final thought. If you know a father that or a mother for that matter. I don't care. A parent, let's go with parent, that is not going to have a holiday with their children, whether they're supposed to or not. Reach out to them. If you know a single dad, and you know he's going to be alone, or you're not sure, reach out to him. Send him a text, call, stop by, whatever. Just say, hey, I'm thinking about you. Are you okay? That's all you got to do. You don't need to invite them over, although that would be awesome if you did. Don't let them stay alone, but just letting them know that you're thinking of them. I hate to be hyperbolic here, but you literally could save someone's life. All right, I talked about it earlier. The unaliving rate skyrockets around the holidays, especially for divorced dads. Reaching out, saying, hey, you okay? Thinking about you. It's a holiday. Things are right. That's all you need to do. Leave it to them to respond however they're going to respond. I have two dear friends. Like I said, my friends are female. They're both female. They will reach out to me tomorrow. I can tell you right now, I already know. That's even that my issues are behind me. Even to this day, they still reach out every single holiday. Carlin, yes. If you want to send them to my podcast, please do. Men Need to Be Heard on YouTube, Instagram. Men Need to Be Heard 3 on TikTok. But the podcast is on YouTube. I am going to have it up on Apple and Spotify, hopefully shortly. Apple, I did get approved. I just got to get the finalization done on that. Spotify, I'm still going through the process, but the podcast will be up on those eventually also. Stay tuned on that. But getting back to what I was talking about, reach out to them. Just let them know you're there. Let them know you're thinking of them. I can't tell you how valuable that was to me back in the day. Even now it's valuable to me, right? How much it meant to me that I had friends who knew I was alone, and just simply said, hey, I'm thinking about you. You know, like I said, my one friend lives 2,000 miles from me. Her and I have been friends for a long time now. She'll send me that text. I know it's coming tomorrow morning. She'll probably see this and kind of laugh at me for pointing it out. But all she simply says is, you okay? How you doing? You know, it'll be a happy Easter. You're hanging in there, something like that. All right. You'd be amazed what a difference that can make. And like I said earlier, and again, I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here. If you got a dad who's so down and is having those terrible thoughts, you might, that glimmer of hope that someone cares could literally save a life. And you know, I never say to someone you've got to step in, because that's not fair. But if you know someone who's really down, I'm trying to be, you know, not get banned here, and considering something serious, if you know what I mean, do step in. Don't wait for them to ask you for help. I know some of the experts will say, you know, they've got to ask for help and all that. I get it. Step in. All right. I've never been there. I understand that. I've talked with people. In fact, Matt talks about it on the podcast tomorrow. I totally get it. I just can't fathom ever doing something like that. It's just not something I could do. But God help, take the time to reach out to someone like that. And if you really are concerned about them, call 911 if you have to. I'm sorry, but better to be safe than sorry, for lack of a better terms. You know, and again, I'm not in any way disparaging someone who's thinking that way, you know, in those negative thoughts, because I get it. It's awful, but it happens a lot around the holidays, and it happens a lot to divorced dads. That's why the unaliving rate is what it is. All right, I have been babbling on forever. Guys, thanks for watching. Again, I'm Dan. Men Need to Be Heard. On TikTok, it's Men Need to Be Heard 3, because, hello, the first 3 accounts were banned. 1 and 2 were banned. I had a prior account to that got banned. That was under a different name. So this is the one I have. On Instagram and YouTube, it's Men Need to Be Heard. Follow me there. As I said, I tend to put same content on Instagram and TikTok, but YouTube I do additional content. I do a Patreon that I have started. It's up and running. I'm going to be really eventually diving into that more. One of the things I'm going to be doing on that is, for those that don't know, I am in the past I have done peer counseling as a domestic violence counselor, so I'll be doing some work with that and some other stuff. So if you want to follow me on Patreon and contribute, it just helps me to help you. Again, that's all I'm going to say on it. I don't want to be one of those type people. But to follow me, share my stuff, guys. Some people mentioned they're going to share it with their son and some other people. I'm trying to help guys out, all right? The big issue, I would say the biggest by a mile issue that men have is that we try and go our own way and be solitary. And that has to stop, okay? And I'm not saying that in a mean way. I'm saying it to save people, right? I get it. I was a loner. Some respects I still am, all right? I don't like people. I always say that to this day. I know I put myself out there, but I don't like people, all right? Speak up. We need to speak up. As dads, as men, we need to share what we're going through. Maddie and I talk about this on the podcast that'll go up tomorrow. The more we speak out, Maddie, me, some of the other guys, the more guys reach out to us to share their stories. And they find out it's not just me. Because guys think I'm the only one dealing with this. You are not. It's the ones not having to deal with it that are the rare ones, believe it or not, all right? I'm trying to help guys. The more you can share it, the more guys we can get involved, even if it's just doing stupid things like liking the videos, because you all know how the algorithm works, right? You like it, it goes further. We want to help people, all of us, right? Maddie, me, all the guys, and yes, some of the ladies too. I don't want to exclude them. Yes, I do like people, but being alone is a good thing for your own peace of mind. G Priest 5, I couldn't agree with you more. That's exactly my mindset. But I don't like people. No, I kid. When I say I don't like people, I'm kind of half kidding. But the more that we share our stories, MRA means Men's Right Advocate, Dustin. So we get hated on. I didn't change the title of this. I probably should have, because I did a live last week that was based on that. But I didn't worry about the title because I wasn't planning on doing this. Like I said, at the very beginning, for those just jumping on now, I had a couple of guys reach out to me this morning that are struggling because it's a holiday weekend. And one of them got denied access to their children. So I figured I would just jump on for a few minutes. I'm on an hour and 15 now. But, you know, again, to kind of put a bow on this, as I like to say, and wrap it up, because I don't want to go too much longer. If you know a guy who's struggling, reach out, share my stuff, share Maddie's stuff, follow the podcast. Again, I know it's shilling for my podcast, but I really believe that we can help each other out through that and share what we're going through and help guys realize that they're not alone. And that by talking together, by coming together as a team, we can change it. The issue men have is we do not work together, all right? I've been involved in fathers' rights groups, men's rights groups for decades. I will tell you right now, the average fathers' rights group has less than 50 members. The average women's group has thousands and thousands of members. That's on us, not them. We need to come together. And I get it, guys. All right. It's not in our nature really to do that. We tend to be loners, especially when we're struggling. I get it. Probably better than anyone else. But we have to change that. And that's the reason I have my channels. It's to educate. It's to make guys see that they're not alone. And it is to bring about change. You know, it's a struggle. It's mentally tough on me sometimes because I get frustrated because I'm trying to help. And I'll say to guys, hey, let's take action. Recently, Iowa Fathers, Jesse was trying to get guys to send emails. I put out a video. Dozens of men sent emails. That had an effect, all right? When we come together, yes, Dustin, validate our experiences as men. Amen, brother. That's exactly right. That's what we need to start doing. And supporting one another, One of the things that I will take the bullets for you guys, all right? Let the feminists come at me because there's nothing they can do to me. Nothing. All right. There are guys that come after me. I got a future video coming up on that, but let the guys come at me. The ones that want to be the apologists for what happens to men and say, well, women are doing what men deserve to be. No, stop. All right. I'll take the bullets, but you can help me by sharing the stuff, help Maddie and all the other guys and the ladies. By sharing our stuff, liking it, it helps. All right. That's how you can be part of the team without having to kill, hours of time and all that. Because I get it. You're working and all that stuff. You don't have that kind of time. You don't have the money. But that's how we come together, guys. That's how the women's groups do it. Just saying, why don't we do what they're doing? Because they've been a hell of a lot more successful at things than we are. And yes, G. Priest, share your story. The hard truth is isolation is not new. Men are able to rise. Yes. Together, we can really, really affect change. Trust me on that. Stay tuned. I've got some things I'm kind of working on to kind of help us along. Again, in a positive way. All right. I'm going to wrap it up on that. Again, thank you for watching. This was completely impromptu. I know I was kind of all over the board. I tend to be that on the lives. And, the final note I'll say is if there's anything you want me to talk about, anything you want me to cover, either on the podcast or even on TikTok or Instagram or any of them, you can DM me, although you're better off sending me an email, menneedtobeheard@gmail.com, because the emails, I don't get as many. I get hundreds of DMs a day and thousands of comments. So sometimes I miss things. And again, I apologize for that, but I'm a human being. Thank you again. Reach out to anyone you know that might be alone tomorrow or today. Let them know you're thinking of them. It's the best thing you can do. All right, guys, that's it. Thank you. See you next time.